Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning, we'll be in Mark chapter 10, verses 32 through 52. They were on the way, going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going ahead of them, and they were amazed. But those who followed were afraid. He took the 12 aside again and began to tell them what was going to happen to him. Look, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and experts in the law. They will condemn him to death and will turn him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, spit on him, flog him severely, and kill him. Yet after 3 days he will rise again. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him and said, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. He said to them, What do you want me to do for you? They said to him, Permit one of us to sit at your right hand and the other at your left in your glory. But Jesus said to them, You don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I experience? They said to him, We are able. Then Jesus said to them, You will drink the cup I drink, and you will be baptized with the baptism I experience. But to sit at the right or at my left is not mine to give. It is for those for whom it has been prepared. Now, when the other 10 heard this, they became angry with James and John. Jesus called them and said to them, You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in high positions use their authority over them. But it is not this way among you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. They came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Many scolded him to get him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and said, Call him. So they called the blind man and said to him, Have courage, get up, he is calling you. He threw off his cloak, jumped up, and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, What do you want me to do for you? Then the blind man replied, Rabbi, let me see again. Jesus said to him, Go, your faith has healed you. Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the road. So, you have Jesus' sufferings foretold. James and John wanting to have an elevated position in Jesus' coming glory. And then this blind beggar, Bartimaeus, sitting on the road and being healed. They were amazed, and they were afraid. As they drew near to Jerusalem, the disciples sensed the danger of their mission. Jesus was a wanted man, and yet Jesus was going before them. Therefore the disciples were amazed at the courage of Jesus, and they were afraid of the fate awaiting them all in Jerusalem. We sometimes don't think enough about the courage of Jesus. It took a tremendous amount of bravery for him to walk straight toward his fate at Calvary and walk in front of the disciples. The courage of Jesus is especially amazing in light of our frequent cowardice as Christians, afraid to stand out for Jesus. He wasn't afraid to stand out for us. Yeah, pretty amazing. As they followed, they were afraid. At the same time, the disciples are to be commended for continuing to follow Jesus. It is true that they were afraid, but it is also true that they followed. They will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. Jesus already told his disciples that he would be crucified and rise again the third day. This is the first time in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus revealed that they would deliver him to the Gentiles. This was an additional insult and betrayal. delivery to the Gentiles reveals that Jesus will be held in contempt by his own countrymen, for the Gentiles are the last people to whom the Messiah of the people of God should be handed over. Yeah. Hmm. It's, I guess, on the subject of low Markian Christology, um, here you have a prophecy by Jesus that he would be killed and then he would rise after 3 days. Not that God would raise him, but that he would rise. Because he had the power to lay down his life and he had the power to take it up again, which is not something a mere man can say. And they will mock him and scourge him and spit on him and kill him. Significantly, Jesus mentioned the shame of his suffering. Jesus suffered the most terrible, emotional humiliation in his death, and it was done out of love for us. Yeah. The sharing in the shame of Jesus marked the early church and was evidence of their commitment and strength. Acts 5:41 says, "So they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name." It's not that the disciples rejoiced in the shame itself, because Jesus didn't rejoice in the shame itself. Instead, they rejoiced in identifying with Jesus and gladly suffered shame if they had to. Grant us that we may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left, in your glory. Despite the continual declaration of his coming suffering, the disciples still thought that when Jesus got to Jerusalem, he would establish a political kingdom. Here, James and John asked for positions of high status in Jesus' administration, which they anticipated would be installed soon. The place of honor was the seat on the right. The place of second honor was the seat on the left. They asked for the two most prestigious places in Jesus' administration. Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. This was no doubt an outgrowth of the continual topic of conversation among the disciples. They often spoke about which one of them was the greatest. James and John felt confident that they will be the greatest, so they asked Jesus to confirm their opinion by appointing them to high positions now. You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? As it would turn out, both James and John took the cup and were baptized in suffering, but they each experienced the suffering in different ways. James was the first apostle to be martyred, in Acts 12:1-2. Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James the brother of John with the sword. According to tradition, John was never martyred, though he survived an attempted murder by immersion in a vat of boiling oil, according to a reasonably reliable church history. In popular Greek usage, the vocabulary of baptism was used to speak of being overwhelmed by disaster or danger, and a similar metaphorical use of submersion is present in Scripture. You will indeed drink the cup that I drink. Perhaps when Jesus said this, a big smile came over the face of James and John. They thought they had won something, and so did the other disciples. When the 10 heard it, they began to be greatly displeased with James and John. However, it is doubtful that Jesus smiled, because he knew what the baptism they asked for was all about. He knew that it was a baptism of suffering. Those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them. Their desire for position and status showed they didn't know the nature of Jesus yet, in respect to leadership and power. Those who exercise power or authority in the church today as lording it over others still don't understand the Jesus style of leadership and life. Yet it shall not be so among you. It is a stinging rebuke to the manner in which the modern church looks to the world for both its substance and style. Plainly, the church is not to operate the way the world does. Yeah, it's a different paradigm in the Church of Christ, because our greatest ruler came and served all of us by offering his life as a substitute for ours. And not only that, in menial ways too, like feeding us and washing our feet and caring for us for the emotional hurts and pains and healing us. It's yeah, and if the greatest among us came doing all of those things, then the next greatest should emulate that by also serving. Whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. In the kingdom community, status, money, and popularity are not the prerequisites for leadership. Humble service is the greatest and only prerequisite as displayed by Jesus' own ministry. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, real ministry is done for the benefit of those ministered to, not for the benefit of the minister. Many people are in the ministry for what they can receive, either material or emotionally, from their people instead of what they can give. And to give his life as a ransom for many. This is one of the great claims Jesus made about himself and his ministry. He is the one who stands in the place of guilty sinners and offers himself as a substitute for them. Yeah, and again on the topic of low Christology here, you have Jesus saying that his life served as a ransom for many, that there you have substitutionary atonement being called out by Jesus himself. So, what further evolution of Christology do you want? The ransom metaphor sums up the purpose for which Jesus gave his life and defines the complete expression of his service. The prevailing notion behind the metaphor is that of deliverance by purchase, whether a prisoner of war, a slave, or a forfeited life is the object to be delivered. Because the idea of equivalence or substitution was proper to the concept of a ransom, it became an integral element in the vocabulary of redemption in the Old Testament. It speaks of a liberation which connotes a servitude or an imprisonment from which man cannot free himself. Yeah. The redemption of his soul is costly, and he should cease trying forever. Under man's own power, he cannot free himself, but God can free him. Bartimaeus, he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Blind Bartimaeus didn't have much tact, but he did have persistence and determination. People tried to shut him up, but they couldn't because he really wanted a touch from Jesus. The persistent and energetic nature of Bartimaeus' prayer is a good example of prayer. He wasn't discouraged because no one led him to Jesus. Those who told him to stay away did not discourage him. From Spurgeon here. Take the gates of heaven and shake them with thy vehemence, as though thou wouldst pull them up, post and bar and all. Stand at mercy's door and take no denial. Knock and knock and knock again, as though thou wouldst shake the very spheres. But what thou wouldst obtain, an answer to thy cries. The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Cold prayers never win God's ear. Draw thy bow with thy full strength if thou wouldst send thy arrow up so high as heaven. Yeah, a good example for us to be persistent and forceful is not the right word, but it's kind of the right direction. Passionate? Yeah, passionate, I think, deals well with it. Persistent and passionate in our prayers. But I think there's an element of personal, of I really want you to do this in there as well. Yeah. Personal, passionate, persistent prayer. Got a nice alliteration going on now. Have mercy on me. The blind man knew what he needed from Jesus. Mercy. He didn't come thinking that God owed him. All he wanted from Jesus was mercy. Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. The title Rabboni is a strengthened form of rabbi and means my Lord, my master. When Bartimaeus said this, he expressed his humble submission toward Jesus. From Spurgeon again here. Rest assured that those are the best prayers in all respects, if they be earnest and sincere, which go most directly to the point. You know there is a way of praying in the closet and praying in the family, in which you do not ask for anything. You say a great many good things, introduce much of your own experience, review the doctrines of grace very thoughtfully, but you do not ask for anything in particular. Such prayer is always uninteresting to listen to, and I think it must be rather tedious to those who offer it. Go your way, your faith has made you well. The faith of the blind man saved him, because it was a specific kind of faith. It was faith that was determined to reach Jesus. It was faith that knew who Jesus was. It was faith that came humbly to Jesus. It was faith that humbly submitted to Jesus. And it was faith that could tell Jesus what it wanted. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus. Now healed and saved, blind Bartimaeus then followed Jesus. The way of Jesus became his way. This was especially significant when we consider where Jesus was going at the time, to Jerusalem, where a cross waited for him. Yeah. Jesus told Bartimaeus to go his way, but Bartimaeus made Jesus' way his way. Yeah. And Bartimaeus seized on the opportunity to ask Jesus to save him. So we need to take the initiative and get Jesus' assistance while we still can, salvation while we still can, seek him while he may be sought type thing. Okay, Psalm 45, verses 1 through 17. My heart is stirred by a beautiful song. I say, I have composed a special song for the king. My tongue is as skilled as the stylus of an experienced scribe. You are the most handsome of all men. You speak in an impressive and fitting manner. For this reason, God grants you continual blessings. Strap your sword to your thigh, O warrior. Appear in your majestic splendor. Appear in your majesty and be victorious. Ride forth for the sake of what is right, on behalf of justice. Then your right hand will accomplish mighty acts. Your arrows are sharp and penetrate the hearts of the king's enemies. Nations fall at your feet. Your throne, O God, is permanent. The scepter of your kingdom is a scepter of justice. You love justice and hate evil. For this reason, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of joy, elevating you above your companions. All your garments are perfumed with myrrh, aloes, and cassia. From the luxurious palace comes the music of stringed instruments that makes you happy. Princesses are among your honored guests. Your bride stands at your right hand, wearing jewelry made with gold from Ophir. Listen, O princess, observe and pay attention. Forget your homeland and your family. Then the king will be attracted by your beauty. After all, he is your master. Submit to him. Rich people from Tyre will seek your favor by bringing a gift. The princess looks absolutely magnificent, decked out in pearls and clothed in a brocade trimmed with gold. In embroidered robes, she is escorted to the king. Her attendants, the maidens of honor who follow her, are led before you. They are bubbling with joy as they walk in procession and enter the royal palace. Your sons will carry on the dynasty of your ancestors. You will make them princes throughout the land. I will proclaim your greatness throughout the coming years. Then the nations will praise you forever. Yeah, it's interesting. You have Trinitarian doctrine and language present here. You love justice and hate evil. For this reason, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of joy, elevating you above your companions. So, yeah. So, pretty flat, well, I mean, pretty straightforward answer to the question, does Jesus have a God? The answer is yes. But Jesus is also God, as is the Holy Spirit. They all form the one Godhead. Yeah, and this king, who's referred to as God, dispenses justice, goes out as a warrior, and is married to the princess here, who is the church. Your right hand shall teach you awesome things. In the thinking of ancient Israel, the right hand spoke of a person's strength and skill, because most people are right-handed. This means that the exercise of the strength and skill of the king teaches him, and teaches him awesome things. Applying this to Jesus Christ may seem strange. We may wonder what awesome things Jesus learned through his own right hand. Hebrews 5:8 says of Jesus that he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Jesus learned the practice of obedience in the fiery test of his own suffering. This was an exercise of his strength and skill, and one of the awesome things he learned. Your arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. These arrows are spoken of in the plural because while there are arrows of conviction, arrows of justice, arrows of terror, there are also arrows of mercy, arrows of consolation. While there are arrows that kill sin, there are also arrows that kill despair, which also is a sin. And as there are arrows that smite and slay our carnal hopes, so there are other arrows that effectually destroy our sinful fears. And all those arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. There is not a blunt one in the whole quiver. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews explained how these words specifically apply to Jesus. He noted not only that these words say that Jesus is the eternally enthroned God, but also that God the Father regards him so. The writer of the Hebrews explained that prophetically, the sons of Korah gave us the words that God the Father spoke to God the Son. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you. The person of the anointed king is described in a fascinating way. In Psalm 45:6, he himself is addressed as God. Now in Psalm 45:7, the king is described as relating to God, from whom he has received an anointing. This is a strange statement. This king is God, and yet receives from God. Passages like this are the foundation for the idea of the Trinity, that there is one God who exists in three persons. This is the way to make sense of what seems to be contradictory statements in the Bible. Yeah. And one other thing that stuck out to me was the princess was admonished to forget her own people and her father's house. Using the concept of Genesis 2:24, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. This was an invitation to this particular royal daughter to leave her people and her father's house to be joined to the anointed king in marriage. Yeah, that is leaving her past behind, leaving the previous sin that she was acquainted with behind, and joining herself fully to the king. And finally, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. The blessing from the Lord makes a person rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. There are many who have been blessed with riches and are wise enough to receive those riches as God's blessing. They understand that every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, from James 1:17. And he adds no sorrow with it. This is a greater blessing upon a smaller blessing. To receive riches from God is to be blessed. To have riches without the sorrow that often comes with them is an even greater blessing. There are many rich people who are miserable and have great sorrow along with their riches. From Trepp here, those three vultures shall be driven away that constantly feed on the wealthy worldling's heart: care in getting, fear in keeping, and grief in losing the things of this life. God giveth to his wealth without woe, store without sore, gold without guilt. So that was from Trapp. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.